All right, and I'm just going to let everyone in to join us today. Welcome to our huddle today, friends. Just letting people in. We'll just take a minute. We are so excited to welcome you today for our second ever huddle. Today, our huddle is on budget authority. Who controls your budget and how? I have shortly, I'm going to invite our wonderful guests here to introduce themselves, but I'm going to take a second to let more folks join because it's always very busy at the top as everyone's getting here at the same time. Thank you for everyone who's able to join us. And I'll officially get started in a second. All right. Well, we are so excited that you're here for the Self-Direction Center huddle on budget authority, who controls your budget and how. And I have a wonderful panel here joining me today that I'm going to introduce in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and get started first with a few logistics and welcome items. So if we can go to the next slide. First, I want to make sure everyone knows that we have closed captioning available today. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see an option that says there's a little CC icon, show captions, that will turn on closed captions for you. If you have any issues, let us know in the chat and we can help troubleshoot so you can get the closed captions turned on. And if we go to the next slide. Just another view if this is how the captions would show up on your screen. And if you have any issues with that, let us know in the chat. We just go to the next slide. I would be remiss if I did not start by really saying thank you to our founding partners who have given us essential funding to get started at the Self-Direction Center in our first year and has made programming like this one possible. This special founding partners campaign is what's really helped us kick off as a new organization. So, especially thank you to our legacy founding partners, GT Independence and PPL, as well as our visionary partners, Applied Self Direction and Assurance SD. You can visit our website at www.selfdirectioncenter.org/founding partners, and you can see the full list of all 23 partners who have lended their support to make conversations like this one possible. So we are so grateful. If we could go to the next slide. You may have joined us last month. This is a new concept, but we have started what we are calling the Huddle series, where we really want this to be different than your traditional webinar where you show up and listen to a presentation. We want this to be a conversation, both in terms of bringing together a great panel that cares about a specific topic related to self-direction, but also we really want to engage with those of you who are here listening today. Throughout today's conversation, we're going to be inviting you to participate in the chat, and we're going to have time at the end to invite you into the conversation. You see an empty chair here, and maybe that will pull you up to the chair if you're so willing to join us. But it's really about learning together, having a more open, honest conversation about what's happening in self-direction, and really coming together to tackle the big questions that we're all grappling with around self-direction and how we can continue to grow the model as a community. So if we look at the next slide, just to talk a little more about the huddle. Again, we're trying to have a conversation and not be too scripted. This isn't your grandma's webinar. One of our panelists from last month helped us come up with that. But we're also, really here and willing to make mistakes, both in terms of doing the huddle, but also in conversation. None of us are perfect. And we want to explore and try something new, and we're going to continue to grow and evolve this format so it can be as inclusive as possible, as conversational as possible. But we have to learn by doing things. We really do want you to drive the conversation, so I do encourage you to really participate in the chat. We'll be looking at that and listening, and engage with each other. And we want you to expect and embrace discomfort. We all have different perspectives on budget authority, on self-direction. You might hear a perspective you've not heard before. Maybe it makes you uncomfortable. Maybe it's different than how you think about things. And we invite you to sit with that, before you react and be open to seeing things from a new vantage point. And I think that's a big part of what the huddle's all about. So, with that said, I am absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce this wonderful team of what we're calling huddlers, our panelists today, who are all here to share about their experience. So, Maria, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm Maria Matson. I am in Ohio. I work at the Access Center for Independent Living in Dayton as the education and advocacy specialist. I am a user of self-directed services. We have had self-direction that we run a little, uh, of our statewide advocacy committee under the name Breaking Silences. So you're welcome to look us up. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you, Maria. We're so glad you're here. Charlie Carr, you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to say how honored I am to be with my fellow huddlers. It's a great group of people, and I want to also give a shout out and a thanks to Molly for venturing out on this really exciting this self-determination center. It's a huge undertaking, but we've got some great people to make it happen. So I have been a PCA user employer for 1974. I was involved in starting the Medicaid funded PCA program, the first of its kind in the country, and it grew from 15 slots in 1974 to 50,000 people now, and 58,000 PCAs. So it's grown quite a bit. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm with the Disability Policy Consortium, which is an advocacy organization that does research, it does social policy, it does a number of other things, and it's completely driven by people with disabilities of all types. And it's a wonderful group to work with at the sort of the end of my career. So I welcome this discussion. I have a lot to learn about self-direction, not self-direction so much as budget authority, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what people have to say and chiming in with what I think are some important points as we move along. So thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you, Charlie. We are honored to have you, and your kind words mean so much. So, Christiana, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christiana Morales. I also am so excited to be part of a huddle. First, I love the name because it really does talk about like we're all here to group together, to partner to make this a reality for everybody. And that I think that's really our dream. I have a son who is 24, who is in his fifth year of the self-determination program in California. And while we have a very, very large self-directed services in California through in-home support services and participant-directed services and some veteran services, the most robust program is called the Self-Determination Program in California, and it came available to everybody July of 2021. And so that's what I'll be talking about really today is this kind of cutting edge, leading the pack self-determination program in California.
Thank you, Christiana. And I think one of the things that's exciting about today is each of your different states are at a very different stage with budget authority. And that's going to be a big part of our conversation today is learning from each other and seeing how different this can look. So appreciate having you on the cutting edge there. And last but certainly not least is Martha Bird. If you want to introduce yourself and you go ahead and cue us on the slides when you're ready.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put up the first slide. So, my name is Martha Bird, and I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am a visual artist. What you're looking at behind you is the homepage of my website. I just wanted to give you a little tickle taste of what I do. I'm also trained as a holistic RN, although I'm not working officially that way, although I feel like it's part of it when I'm talking to the public about my work and the health benefits that can happen with creating. Um, I wanted to take a moment to just welcome you to the national conference that's happening in May, is going to be happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm just so pleased to be here to be able to welcome you because I will be at that. So if you see me there, please feel free to say hello to me. And we're also getting ready for our No Kings rally on Saturday, which Minneapolis St. Paul is the flagship event of the country. So we're expecting people like Joan Baez and Bruce Springsteen and Jane Fonda and some other good stuff. So this is going to be my very first protest that I'm participating in, and I'm doing a lot of disability related things to make sure that it works for me. So I am disabled. My disability is related to some physical things like fibromyalgia and back injury in my back, as well as mental illness that includes PTSD and some dissociation. And those symptoms will interfere with my living my best life. And it's with the CADI waiver and the CDCS. Our program is called CDCS, which stands for Consumer Directed Community Supports. That has been so wonderful, and you'll hear me talk a little bit more about how I use that program. But in our state, what's required is that first you be on medical assistance. And so the medical assistance program I'm on is called MAEPD, and it's medical assistance for employed persons with disabilities. And we're required to show $65.01 a month of income. And that's a little tricky as an artist. And so I've learned how to kind of, figure that out for myself. I started the self-directed program in 2024. And it is a big learning curve to figure out the program and how to use it. Our program started back in 1997. And originally I was on the traditional pro caddy, and then that was in 2022, and then switched over to this program in 2024. And one of the things that's in the news a lot right now is fraud in Minnesota, particular. And I just wanted to comment on that when it relates to this program. That personally, I feel fraud is almost impossible to happen in this program because each of us that are on the CADI waiver have a case manager, and everything has to be approved through the case manager, and it has to relate to our min choices, our assessment, our yearly assessment that gets done that talk about what our needs are. So I just wanted to make that comment very specifically about the self-direction program. I don't know how fraud could ever happen in this program. And I will just say that the statistics that we have in Minnesota is that the fraud rate is maybe 2% when it's much higher in the rest of the country. So what people are hearing on the news is not the actuality of what's happening in Minnesota. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
Oh, next slide. Let's do the next slide. Yeah. So I work with Willow, and I just finished my Willow harvest. I do it once a year, and I just finished it last Saturday with support. I had 20 volunteers that helped me, which was wonderful. So it's cutting down the willow when it's dormant, which is that picture on the bottom. So the one on the left is when it's growing during the summer, and I use 1 year's growth. And then in the winter, it drops the leaves, and I bring in volunteers. I had 20 this year. And then on Monday and Tuesday this week, I have another person that's been employed through my CDCS program, the self-direct program, someone that I can hire to help me process the willow. And that's the picture on the right of what the willow looks like when it's all sorted by variety and by size. And the next slide is the last one, and that's just an example of my work and the scale of the work that I do. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Martha. And I think your art is just so gorgeous, and it happens to be the kind of thing I would buy. So I love seeing your art and making the connection of what that means in the context of this conversation too. So Brenda, you can go to that next slide. What I will do today is really about the conversation, but just to level set very quickly, I want to help define what is budget authority from the perspective of the federal government, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. This definition is pulled from the 1915C technical guide, which I know there are some self-direction programs that operate under a different waiver or state plan, but the 1915C technical guide tends to be a really a reference point for a lot of Medicaid programs. But according to Medicaid, according to CMS, under the budget authority, the participant has the authority and accepts the responsibility to manage a participant directed budget. Depending on the dimensions of the budget authority, which is determined by the state, this authority permits the participant to make decisions about the acquisition of waiver goods and services that are authorized in the waiver service plan and to manage the dollars included in a participant directed budget. Now, that's a lot to process, but really budget authority can look very different state to state and program to program, depending on design decisions that have been made at the state level. And it can range anywhere from being able to have a little bit of control over how much wages, how high wages are, or it could go much further to include a lot of control over wages, control over purchasing goods and services. But today, we want to talk about what does this really look like in everyday life? How is it different state to state? And that's what we're excited to dig in about. So if we go to the next slide, let me just lay the groundwork for this conversation to kick off. And that's really to start. I'm going to ask our huddlers to speak to what does budget authority really mean to you in your life, depending on how it exists or doesn't exist in your state. How would you explain it to someone who's never heard of it? What does it look like in your life? Or why do you want it if you don't have access to it? How is it different from having no budgetary control? Now, I'm going to invite our huddlers in a second, but for those of you who are with us that aren't up on the stage, I really encourage you to join us in the chat and talk about what budget authority means to you and why it's important. And I'll help weave that into our discussion. And again, we'll have time later today to talk, to give folks a chance to talk more. But I'm wondering, Christiana, do you want to go first and tell us about what budget authority means to you? What does it look like in California? And then I'll make my way down the line so you guys can be kind of preparing.
So in California, budget authority kind of it has a few meanings. And the first one is we are part of the discussion in creating the budget, how much money we have to spend. So that is created with a meeting where the participant actually gets to say, hey, these are the services that I need. And based on what our traditional services would be, so the vendored services, they would say, this is the total amount you have to spend when you go into the self-determination program. So we have some say in, to begin with, how much the budget is. And then once we're in the self-determination program, the intent of the law really is that's a total dollar amount that is no longer linked to specific services. So we then have a total dollar amount that we can spend, and we have rules on how the money can be spent, but you have to have a goal for it in your plan. It has to be federally reimbursable, meaning that it's on our waiver. It's a service we're allowed to pay for, and that a generic resource isn't available first. But short of that, we have a lot of leeway then to spend that money how we want, to determine how much in each of the areas we want to spend the money, how much we want to pay people, which for in California, finding people is extremely difficult. And so being able to pay somebody a bit more money has really impacted our ability to find people to hire and to keep them. And so that for us is really the key to what it looks like and how it's really been able to help us access services. And so it is always something we're fighting to protect here in California and to maintain. And I think Martha already talked about the concerns over fraud, waste, and abuse. Of course, those are always things that people are concerned about. And so that's, to me, budget authority is really, really key to true self-directed services, is to be able to say, this is what I think, how many hours, who I want to work with, and what I want to pay them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christiana. Martha, do you want to share for us what budget authority means to you and kind of what it looks like in your life? How's it made a difference?
Yeah, thank you, Christiana. That was a great introduction. It covered a whole bunch of stuff I don't have to say, so thank you. So as I explained, when I first got on the caddy waiver is what we call it. There's the traditional or the CDCS. I was on the traditional. I was going to a fine arts day program, and that was a great match for me. And so that cost a lot of money. So that was good for me to be on the traditional caddy at that point. What happened is that I outgrew the space. My willow is 10 to 12 feet tall, and the program was getting so popular that my space was getting smaller and smaller, and I could no longer use it. And so I needed to leave there in order to continue my art practice, which was scary for me because that had all the supports there that I needed. So that was when I learned about the self-direction program, that it could be more oriented and I could build my own network of support to try to kind of replicate, like, for example, some of the, I call it art consultation, but it's like, consultation with my business about how to, given my disability needs, how do I keep progressing towards my goals? So that was when I switched over to the self-directed, and there's nobody really out there educating how does this work. So it helped knowing other people that were self-directing as well. What are key components of the self-direction? I'm going to compare the both, the traditional with the self-direction. The traditional is a large budget that can always be added to as your needs increase. It can be added to. The self-directed budget in Minnesota is much, much smaller, and it's capped. Like, you can't go above that if your needs, well, you'd have to have a new assessment, but basically that it's capped. The interesting thing in Minnesota, I don't know if they have it in other states, is you can apply for an exception. And one of the exceptions is if you're employed, if you have a vocational goal. And because I'm a visual artist, I have a vocational goal, and that meant that my budget could increase by 30%. So that helped. And then, like Christiana said, it's during that assessment that happens once a year that determines how much I qualify for in funds. And what I will say, we'll get to another point where we talk about tips, but I'll just throw that in here, that it's so, so, so important to be very, very honest during that assessment. Be very honest about what your struggles are. I mean, lots of us try to cover up, how hard this or this or this is, but that's a place where you definitely want to say it. And then part of having the self-direction is that I hire a support planner, and that person helps fill out all the paperwork and helps me think about what's the goal, what's the outcome, all that. That's a big, big help. And I would say real integral to the plan. And then hiring an FMS, financial management services company, and they help with the paying and the reimbursing and all that stuff. So for our self-direction program, those two pieces are very important for me. And let's see. So my supports involve supporting the basic of life, like I own a home, so lawn care and housekeeping and things like that. And that enables me to have the energy and the focus and to focus on my art, which is my goal. And then also the self-direction program helps cover, like, an art consultant that I meet with weekly who helps me, what are my goals and what am I working on and what are the steps to working on that. And the disability that I have interferes with me doing that on my own. So that support is very helpful. And then I say I'm living my best life. I'm really, what is it that's particular to me and what is it that I need to get there? And it just keeps getting better and better for me.
I love that, Martha. Thank you for sharing that. Maria, how about you talk about what budget authority means to you and what's that looking like over in Ohio these days?
Sure, thanks. And that was great. I love hearing Christiana and Marcia talk. I've learned so much already. So in Ohio, we didn't always have self-direction within the home care waiver, which is the waiver that I'm on. We had it within aging and developmental disability. And we had it under managed care, but it was limited to only aid services, not nursing services. And so for me, I have a ventilator, I have a tracheostomy. My disability is a form of muscular dystrophy. So all of my needs and my care needs are considered skilled. And so for years, I couldn't even consider using any of the self-directed programs that we had because, first and foremost, it didn't give you an option for any nursing care. So several years ago, well, I'm going to say this first, for 10 years, we advocated to have self-direction within the home care waiver. About 3 to 4 years ago, the advocates in Ohio who came together and who are very, very strong advocates said we need to change this. Ohio is ranking like at the bottom in the country for self-directed programs. And so there was a collaboration between the managed care organization and the advocates to bring applied self-direction to Ohio and to have a huge summit with all the parties that would need to participate. And so we did that, and the advocates continued to work with the Department of Medicaid to get self-directed direction implemented within the home care waiver. We've had it for about a year and a half. Budget authority, at least from where I sit, looks very different than what I'm hearing. So because in our waiver, we implemented self-direction as a way to receive your services. So you can have an agency provide services. You can have what we call independent providers, which are caregivers who contract directly with the Department of Medicaid to be your caregivers, or you can opt into self-direction. Now, in order to do that, of course, you have to have a discussion with your case manager. They have to authorize that you are capable of self-directing your services, which I think we all agree at some level that given the right tools and the right guidance, just about anyone can self-direct. But we still have to be authorized to self-direct. Now, because that's a way that we can receive our services, we can still have a combination. So for me, I have independent providers to provide services, and I have a self-directed provider. Under the self-directed provider, I can use budget authority. Now, all that means is that my case manager has authorized me to use the service. There is a cap on what I can use, but I can pay anywhere below that cap. So for me, if I hire a new person I'll start them out at a lower pay rate just until they get used to my care, till they're here for a little while, till I know they're going to stick around, be reliable. Then I can do a pay rate. But I can only do a pay rate up to the cap that is authorized. And what frustrates a lot of us is we never get to see our budget for all of our care. So I'm with a managed care, um, a managed care plan. I would love to see what the entire budget is that the managed care plan receives from Medicaid for my care. That's something that's never shared. It's never transparent. So when they cap us in self-direction, they're capping us at the pay rate that a waiver provider gets. So if a waiver provider's pay rate is, say, 20 an hour, the highest I can pay a self-directed caregiver is 20 an hour. They don't actually shift around funds. I can't say, gee, I don't really need all that you have allotted for, let's say, supplies. I'd like to cut back on that and use that toward caregiving. I can't do anything like that. And that would be amazing to do. But for me, to have a self-directed caregiver, the process to hire someone is so much easier than it is to get an independent provider enrolled with the Department of Medicaid. That process here can literally take anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on what they do. If something's done wrong, it's a long process. With self-direction, I did it, I think it was 6 weeks, and that was only because it was brand new here, and they were still working out a lot of the bugs. I believe now, I think it's a 2 to 3 week turnaround, which is incredibly quick. It's still not quick enough. We should be able to hire someone, very quickly for our needs. But for us, it's a big difference. So I really am interested to hear what other people experience with budget authority, because I think we have a lot of room for improvement in Ohio. But we've also come a long way in a very short time. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It's really helpful to get that report kind of in progress of where things have progressed and where things still can go. And thank you so much. And you've been getting a lot of reaction in the chat. People are sharing about their own experiences and others also wishing that they could see their budget. But Charlie, I'm going to go to you. And things are a little different for you. So why don't you talk about what budget authority means to you and why you want it?
Well, I'd like to approach this from a different angle. First of all, Massachusetts was the first Medicaid-funded PCA program in the country. And so in 1974, it began, and I was part of that beginning. And we approached the PCA program, personal care assistant program here from an independent living perspective. So it's all about control. We want control over our lives. We want to be able to, and we demand that we are in control of the self-direction. for a portion of PCA. So people that are enrolled in the PCA program here, of which there are now more than 50,000 people in a very small state like Massachusetts, and literally over the years we have emptied out nursing homes and people have opted into this self-directed PCA program. So it's really fundamentally based in the principle of independent living, which is control. So budget authority is precisely that. We want to have control over our lives. We want to live our lives the way we want to, and that means that in order to do that, we need budget authority, and we don't have it in Massachusetts. Not because we have fought for it in laws; it's because it's been lower on the uh, priority of things going on here. But we've been working on it in a small group for about 3 years now, and we're gearing up now to go after our state Medicaid agency to implement budget authority through the 1915 J program, I believe. So, we want to be able to, you know, our PCA amount paid is about $23 per hour, which some states may say is very generous. Others may say it's low, depending on where you live and what your background is. But we've been fighting for this program for years and years and years, and so we want to be able now to say, okay, so Charlie is approved for 60 hours, right? And that's done by a nurse and an occupational therapist, right? And unfortunately, that's part of this medical model that we are extremely opposed to because we believe that the whole personal care assistance program it is way over medicalized, but that's the life we live in, I guess, right now. So we want to be able to say, okay, I've got 60 hours. I want to be able to spend those hours in a way that makes me in control of my life and have a quality of life that I can't have based on the amount of locked in hours of payment for $23 per hour, right? So there are those times those times. And it's very difficult to get PCAs like somebody to come into your house at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning and turn you and give you medications and whatever you might need right at that ungodly hour for some people. And that means they have to get out of bed, they have to travel to your house, and they deserve to have a higher rate of pay than somebody who just works hours or during the day and can survive on $23 per hour, which is honestly, it's disgusting. It's paycheck to paycheck. People are just trying to survive on that amount of money. And in my area, it's typically a single people that are um, people of color, women with families that are trying to survive on this program. It's not capped per se. You can fight for as many hours as you need, but what is capped is the amount of hours that one PCA can work across all of their employers. So one PCA can't work more than 60 hours for all of their employers, which is really ridiculous. But that's the way the law works here. The Medicaid guidance works here. So to me, budget authority means that A, I have more control of my life. B, I have a better quality of life. And C, I'm in control of what happens in my life. And so this has become a priority for us in Massachusetts. And there's a handful of people that are very interested and willing to fight this fight despite all of the craziness that's going down in Washington. I think finally I'd say that one of the things there are a couple things. One of them is that um, the Medicaid agency needs to be convinced with data, not just our opinions, but hard data that demonstrates that this is not an expense program. For example, it's not more money to have budget authority. Yes, they'll come back and argue, well, support brokers cost money, and they might, but I don't know if that money support brokers and some of my other colleagues could straighten me out on that. But is that a lot of money? And as far as these support brokers go, a lot of us feel like it's intrusive. It's something that we don't feel is particularly necessary. It makes sense to check in every 6 months or so. Are you overspending? Are you underspending? Is there a reason why we get help, or is there a reason why you're overspending? That kind of stuff that makes sense. Those controls are important, but other than that, I don't want somebody breathing down my back telling me you got to spend this, you got to spend that. Those are things that I don't want. I don't, and many of us don't want. We see support brokers as possibly becoming very intrusive in our lives, and as far as the fiscal management services agencies are concerned, we see them simply as payroll companies. They shouldn't play any other role other than just keeping track of payroll and making sure that we fall within the guidelines that Mass Health or Medicaid agency sets. But I find that the fiscal management entity we have in Massachusetts, Tempest, has evolved into this incredibly rigid, difficult entity to deal with. And we're constantly fighting with them, with the state Medicaid agency about stupidest things about enrolling people and the paperwork, and people have to get enrolled and approved before they can work, so on and on and on. So finally, just to close out, quality of life, control over my life, and giving a fair wage to PCAs, particularly those that work very difficult hours.
Thank you, Charlie. Really, really well said. And I know that you are not alone in being from a state where there's a real desire to have budget authority, but it's not currently available. Um, I'll go ahead and I'm going to move us to the next slide, but I do want to connect the dots here with some of what I'm seeing in the chat. Really appreciate everyone who shared what budget authority means to you. There's some great discussion here. I just want to, it's related to our next topic, so I'll call it out and then I'll kind of position us on our next question. But um, Justin is someone in Michigan who's kind of called out that he is a self-direction employer and wasn't sure if he had budget authority in Michigan. And luckily, we have some wonderful Michigan folks in the chat who've helped answer to say, yes, you do have budget authority. But one, I want to name that it's not uncommon. Justin, you're not alone in being in a program and not having access to that information. And so I want to name that for as we think about giving advice to folks, because it's so often the case that people self-directing don't have all the information about what their options are in self-direction. And Justin, you then commented later, I'm hoping we can talk about how to give raises to my employees. I've asked my waiver authority and they've given me no guidelines really for how much an employee can make. I also want to know about how to give money to my staff for food, beverages, events when I need them to go with me, so they don't have to use their own money and I don't have to use my own money either. This is very real, tangible. Justin, I want to one acknowledge that none of us on this panel are in depth in Michigan, so we can't answer your specific questions, but I think the questions you raise are common questions that in every state, how you implement giving a raise, how you have additional funds is going to look different. So I'm calling that out as an example. And I'm sorry, Justin, that we can't help you more in depth with your questions specifically for you. But I think what we can speak about is a little bit of what that looks like in different states and how, pointing out that it's not uncommon that people don't know the answers to these questions when they really need to. So that is kind of a great way for us to shift gears here, which is I really wanted everyone to talk about how you use budget authority and what advice you can give to others who are managing their own budget, or someone like Justin who's trying to navigate the system and even understand what's available to me, what your own experiences have been. Um, Things like what's it like to set your own wages and manage your spending plan? If you can purchase goods and services, how has that helped you? What tips and tricks do you have for others based on your experience, knowing that every state is very different? And for those of you in the chat, before I pass things off, what do you want to know about what it's like to use budget authority and self-direction? Questions you have for our huddlers, or based on your own experience, what's your best advice to others on making budget authority work for you? So I'm gonna keep us going in the order, and I'll start with you, Christiana, and also feel free. You got a chance to hear everyone else to share any questions that maybe came up for you, but I'll pass it to you to talk about your advice and your perspective on this.
It's so helpful and interesting to hear how it's being implemented so differently in all the different states. And so we can also, I think, learn from each other, like, oh, okay, what's possible, what's not possible. I'm really enjoying this. When we think about the importance of budget and authority in California, we are permitted to hire people, pay for services, pay for goods, and purchase items as well. So we have a really robust options of things that we can do, and which is important because what we find is there may be a one-time purchase that could reduce your increase your independence and reduce your needs for things later, and say, well, maybe I'll use a few less hours right now. And that's what budget authority means, is we can prioritize what are the things that you need in your life to accomplish what you want to do, and maybe you'll do a trade-off at some point. You may, so we can have a class that you want to take, but you need somebody to support you to go with you, and they can pick you up and drive you and go to the class. And so my son has done that. And he needed social skills pieces. And the options for vendored service for social skills was in a setting with other people who needed social skills. It was like a class. He did not want to do this. And he'd always say to me, the only thing we have in common is that we all have autism. Like, how am I going to learn? He wanted to be out in the community doing the things he wanted to do and have the support he needed there. So really social skills in a natural environment. And he was able to do that because he had that budget authority. Because he could say, I'm not going to use it for speech. I'm going to be out in the community. This is what I'm going to do. And he was even able to have his person going with him trained to help him with those social skills. So that budget authority has really been able for him to create the life in the community that he wanted to lead. And the part of the reason he went into the self-determination programs is the traditional vendored services couldn't meet his needs. They were better than nothing, but they weren't able to meet his needs. So this budget authority and us being able to pick his priorities, being able to pay those people a living wage, made a huge difference for him. So to us, that's what it means, the importance of why that budget authority is so key to building his self-determined life.
Thank you so much, Christiana. Really, really helpful. Martha, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I don't use anybody that is on wage, so I just use goods and services. That's what it is most beneficial for me at this point. So what I kind of under the tips, what I've learned to do is really kind of the world is my oyster. Think about what are my needs and what would help support me in my life. Where am I going? What's hard for me? And to really think about, identify what my need or my want is. And then from there, I research how and why that would benefit me. So I go on Dr. Google on the internet and I say, what are the benefits of this for this condition, or what are the benefits for that? And so I start to gather my resources and research and look for reputable sites. And then I present that I work with my support planner to create the plan. And so I use a combination of quoting the research, And then I go back to we call it a min choices assessment, which is the yearly assessment where you talk to an assessor about what your needs are. I go back and I read that with a fine tooth comb and find phrases of that support that there is a need for what I've researched. And that's why it's so important to be so honest in your assessment so that that can be documented. So I put those two things together into the support plan. And an example of that is when I was new, I had talked to the county person and I said, massage would be a very helpful thing for my low back. And she's like, nope, we don't cover massage. And that's not going to be covered. So then later I did my research about why that would be helpful for me. Then I found a provider in the area who considers themselves a medical provider of massage, and they partner with the Veterans Association, with workers' comp, with other systems. So then I talked to him about what some of the language that they've used around that. So then we came up with, he said, no, don't say massage, that will never get covered. So it's called soft tissue manual therapy. So that's what we put in there. And so then we included some of the wording that he had given me, and then we put it through the county and it got approved. So working with, what are my needs, finding the research, finding it in your assessment paperwork, talking to someone who provides that, helping them, craft the language of the profession that they do, and then put it in the plan. So that's one of my tips, and I've just come to that recently. Like that's my formula that I'm going to do. The other one is that if you have a case manager, I have changed case managers a couple of times. Every case manager is different. So we have the county, and then the county can't do all the work. So there's contracted case management organizations, and there's a whole bunch of them. And so I was working with one, and then you can change case managers within the same organization and just try someone new. I find that it's the supervisor that's the most important, the kind of the entry level work. There's some transition in the staffing and stuff in terms of really understanding the program it's quite complicated. So it usually goes to the supervisor. So yeah, not hesitating to change to a new case manager. And then they have an appeal process if something's been denied. I did go through the appeal process, and it was horrendous for me. It was took a big toll on me. I felt very opposite of empowered. So my recommendation would be to do anything you can not to appeal something. So that's that involves having detailed conversations with your case manager. Things that we've tried has been my support planner writes it all up. We send it in an email to the case manager and say, hey, we're thinking about submitting for this. What do you think? Do you have any feedback? Is there any suggestions you have for how we could make it stronger or more approvable? So it does lengthen, but what I found is if we just put it in a revision, then they kind of have to say yes or no or do a pending on it because they want more information. So, and I have told my case manager outright, I don't want to appeal. And when we did appeal, the judge even said, why weren't you two talking? Why weren't you having this conversation? So that was the expectation of the judge too, that we would work together, that it wasn't just this completely authoritarian, like I submit, they say no, we appeal. On that appeal, there were 4 points, and the judge did rule in my favor on 3 of those points. But I still would say it wasn't worth the turmoil that I went through for that. So I can answer more questions about if anybody has that. There's something that I don't know if your states have, but ours does. It's called family and caregiver training, and that's a separate pocket of money. But that was a great thing for me. And that was where I hired an organization to listen. So what we did was we set up this event where I was going to invite all my people together to help me brainstorm a path towards my goals. And it was wonderful. The organization they drew a whole map of what the various steps are, and different people of my people in my community had different suggestions for me. And I still refer to that plan now. So if your county or state offers that, it's called person-centered planning, is what it's called here. And then the last thing that I would say is, well, two things. One is I was fortunate enough to know the guy that started our self-direction program, and I asked his permission that if I didn't know, if I got confused about something, could I ask him off the record, like, how does this work? Like, do you think this is possible? And he gave me permission for that. And so once in a while, I didn't pull that card out very often, but once in a while I'd say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. What do you think? And then when he retired, I asked him, could you give me a different person that's not connected to my case, that I could ask questions to? And I found that very helpful. And then the last thing is, if your state has a self-direction conference, it would be I found it very beneficial for me to go to that, because that's where I met different providers, was able to talk to other people that self-direct, who are their providers and things like that. So our state has one of those, and then now we have the national one that's happening, that will be in Minneapolis this year. So that's, other people that self-direct are the best resources.
Thank you so much, Martha. There was a lot of wisdom in everything you just shared, and I know people are shouting you out and reacting to that. So appreciate such practical feedback. Maria, what about from your vantage point, your perspective? Um, how do you use budget authority? What's your advice to make it work for people?
Yeah, thanks. So in our self-direction program, we do have goods and services. So for us, it's not part of what our budget is. It's an actual um separate resource, and it's $2,500 a year that we can use for various things. Martha did a great job of giving a good illustration of things she uses hers for. In our state, it's a little tricky, and again, because it is a new program, so much is not understood. And goods and services and how to use them is a really big area that both the participants as well as case managers really can't grasp. Um, so for me, in my um, managed care plan, I have a care manager, but then they have two individuals who do everything for self-direction. They do all the authorization. They do the goods and services. They do education if that's needed. Unfortunately, they're not really that educated to educate others, so that's a little downfall. But in ours, we have a well, it's not a debit card, it's like a cash card. So it's almost like what some employers will offer to people to pay them. And so the FMS uses this cash card. It's called Wisely. And we get the cash card when we request a goods and service. The authorization has to go to the FMS. And then there's a process. Yeah, we never know how long the care manager or the person under self direction who works within our plan takes to authorize the funding that you're requesting. And then the FMS, they base when they're going to load the card based on their payroll cycle. So this process from beginning to end, if you've never received the card especially, if you're going for the first time to do this could take like about 6 weeks to do. It's just really long. And if you have the card, it still could take 2 to 4 weeks, depending on where everything falls within the process. But then you need to like really budget. And when I say budget, I mean you have to think about what it is you're purchasing. So some things, if you're familiar with doing online shopping, which most people do today, it's not until you go to check out when they add the different, added costs that you didn't know would be added to it. So if I just asked for, $200, let's say to do a gym program, which of course I can't go to the gym. But if I did that and then I went to pay that, by the time I pay it, they've added on other fees, so that could cost, like $208. Well, now I'm short. Now I've got to start over the process. I've got to request $8 more to do this. And it's that kind of cycle. So because I've done it a couple of times, I try to think about like purchasing 2 or 3 different things. One thing that, is critical, and the other two, maybe that could wait a little bit. And I just assume, I say, I think I'm going to need 500 for all of this, knowing that I'm probably going to need more, but 500 will get me the first thing I need that's critical, and then I can subtract that and go, okay, can I pay for one or the other two? If I can, let's do it. And then the final one hopefully isn't critical. I can wait, trying to check out, see what that cost is, and then request the difference. So it really is a lot of planning, a lot of just figuring out what is needed. But in addition, because the rule was written so broad, which is good, I'm not complaining about that, but because it was written so broad, there's really no clear definition on what you can use it for and what you can't. So an example I'll give you is I just said it would really be helpful if I could do like grocery and shipping delivery from Walmart. That would help a lot. That would be something I don't need to use my caregiver services to help me do. So that's one thing that really isn't crucial. The next thing was, it's really hard to get caregivers. There's a workforce shortage. Um, I'd like to do a subscription with care.com so I can see if I can hire new caregivers. And then the third thing was I have a generator, a whole house generator, because I'm on life support. And I have yearly maintenance that has to be done for it. For me, that was crucial. And I knew about what that would cost. So I gave, a whole total. And I said, this is what it's for. These are what I need. But of course, it had to go through the approval process if everything would be okay. And what kind of really made me laugh, but it was one of those moments when it went back to the Department of Medicaid for the final approval. They were like, I think that's okay. And I'm like, well, you wrote the rule. You think it's okay? I mean, who's going to come back then and say, hey, no, this wasn't? I mean, you guys are it, right? I mean, so that's just kind of the stuff that makes us just have a lot of challenges and makes when Martha said, it's really a lot to do. Parts of this really are a lot. You're assuming a lot of responsibility. And even though you shouldn't have to do this, you have to make sure that every single thing that your caregiver does or doesn't do doesn't result in either you losing a caregiver or you losing a program. So you're juggling a lot when it comes to self-direction. But in the end, I want that say. I want that control. I want to know who's coming in my house. And I want to be the one that said, yeah, I want to hire this person and I train this person for my needs, not an agency train them for everybody's needs. And if that caregiver does an exceptional job, I want to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to give you a raise because I think that you've gone above and beyond what people do. And I think that's so important. And here too, we've already heard the buzzwords: fraud, waste, and abuse. It's being talked about in every single committee meeting that we have now. And it's terrifying. Um, I think we're all just kind of, trying to say, hey, of course, there's going to be issues in programs, but why is it always that every time this comes up, people who receive care and the programs that offer the most independence, why are they always at risk? Why are they always on the chopping block? And then the last thing I'll say, I don't have tricks and tips, but I told you that I host a advocacy group called Breaking Silences. One of our subcommittees is a My Care and Self-Direction subcommittee. So that's an opportunity for people to come together, talk about issues. We bring, people from Medicaid and developmental disability and aging to those meetings to hear the issues and for us to hear about the program and to try to work together to make the programs better and manageable for everybody.
Thank you, Maria. Really, the specificity, your examples, I hope are helpful for people listening who are, one, people trying to navigate these systems, to be thinking about what goes into it, but also I know we have state administrators, FMS folks who might be hearing some of what you're describing and have some opportunities to recognize some opportunities for efficiency and just appreciate that so much. Charlie, I think I've successfully unmuted you. What would you like
Yeah,
to add in terms of advice or what you would want to use budget authority for, or anything you want to react to that's been shared?
well, I think the biggest thing for me and many people with disabilities in Massachusetts is the ability to manage spending. So I spoke about this earlier on to be able to, have within the amount of hours that you're approved for, to be able to spend those the amount of money that you feel is appropriate for each attendant, as long as you don't exceed the cap that has been established for you by the personal care management agency. So that's the largest thing. I found it fascinating, the social determinants of health. It sounds almost like a healthcare plan. It sounds like something that you would find in a managed care organization. We don't have in the self-directed, well, the only Medicaid program we have for personal care we don't have the ability to buy goods and services, or if that's what budget authority allows. That would be a huge plus to be able to take those PCA hours that I'm approved for, and then use some of those hours for social determinants of health. That would be wonderful. We are able to we're given areas that we can bill uh, for personal care assistance. We get very creative. For example, we can certainly use meal preparation time to do ordering online and having meals delivered or food delivered to our houses. We can have PCAs go out and buy things at the store for us, etc. But if it comes down to things like soft tissue massage or whatever the terminology is, that's something that we would have to appeal. And so the idea of having the support brokers or case managers, to me, and this is only my opinion, is just another layer of bureaucracy that I personally don't want to have to deal. I would prefer to go directly, have a conversation with the personal care management agency about, well, I'd like to have this or that approved, and the people that do the evaluations for personal care might try to include that, but oftentimes the Medicaid agency won't allow it. So we're not shy in Massachusetts about going to appeal. We're constantly appealing a lot of things that Medicaid imposes on us, and I'd say 75% of the time we win the appeals. So I don't want to have to go through a case manager or a support broker or whoever it is. I don't know the terminology all that well. I want to be in control. I don't want to have to go to somebody who's another layer of the bureaucracy and say, "Oh, can you try to slip this in, or can you um, somehow create a category that's not the standard program." Uh, I know that that's probably very unpopular, but that's just how we are in Massachusetts. We are uh, a state of people that are very much uh, demanding that we're in control of our programs. The governor just got $100 million from our personal care assistance program, and we flooded the governor's office with over 200 people protesting of the cuts. And the legislature paid attention, of course, and they won't allow that cut to go through. But the fact is that I guess in many respects we're more radical than some of the other states. We won't allow for caps on hours. That's unacceptable. People have lives to live, and yes, it's more expensive. But when you compare the cost of personal care assistance versus living in a nursing home, there's no comparison. And the ironic thing is that the nursing homes, they're treated with kid gloves in the budget. They're either level funded or they get increased funding. But at the same time, home and community based services like personal care are always on the chopping block. So we find ourselves fighting, constantly fighting for keeping budget cuts from affecting home and community-based services, whether it's group adult foster care, adult foster care, PCA, etc. So we're a state that very much fought very hard to get the program started, in a state that fights very hard to keep it from changing and keep it from caps being put in place, or areas that cut back time for the amount of time you can have for each of the areas that are allowed through the PCA program, which is very generous. So I think that I can speak for myself, but also for many people with disabilities, that this idea of having support brokers or uh, case managers is something that's very foreign to us. It's something that we don't really want. We do see the need for there to be sort of checks and balances with Medicaid to make sure that we're not overspending, or if there's some kind of problem going on, that they, periodically check in, maybe every 6 months. But other than that, I don't see a role for that in our state. Our Medicaid program allows for people to self-direct, but it also allows for people to have surrogates. And right now, there are more people that are using surrogates than are using the self-directed program. But they both fall under the personal care assistance program. So anyway, I think we have a lot to learn about budget authority. I like the idea of having social determinants of health as part of using your hours to purchase goods and services. But the way it was described in the speaker before me, it sounded more like a healthcare plan than it did like PCA programs. It's very interesting, and I'm learning more about. But for us, again, it's more about having control over our budgets.
Thank you, Charlie. And as you were talking, it really made me think a future huddle would be a great conversation to have around support brokerage versus, the role of case managers. And there's many different ways of looking at that. And I think you bring a really provocative, important perspective on that. And I think it could be a great discussion in the future to go deeper on. But I'm looking at the clock here and I wish we had more time. The time is just flying. If we can go to the next slide, we've got about 13 minutes left. And our hope had been to have more discussion with the group. So what I'm proposing with our remaining time is that I'm going to ask each of our huddlers to maybe share one thing on this question, which is around what needs to change to better support you to use budget authority. Give us one recommendation, particularly for folks in our audience who are policymakers that you want to share. And then I'm hoping in the meantime, any folks who have questions, comments, we have the prompt. If you could change one thing to make budget authority easier, what would it be? Go ahead and share that. But also, if you have a question for our panelists, I will try to make time to ask our huddlers any questions that still remain. But maybe we have enough time for each of you to give one recommendation and see if we can't have a little interaction here at the end. So I'll just stick to the order. Christiana, what do you think needs to change? What's your recommendation?
I'm hearing a common theme across all of us. Um, One is that it's just really the program plan is not really clear what can and cannot be asked for. So having a cleaner program plan that's very clear what's approved, and then getting that information and training out to people. It is in our state extremely complicated administratively to manage this. And we don't have support brokers built into it. We have independent facilitators, and once you're in the program, you have to pay for them outside of your own budget. They don't increase the budget for it. So having more assistance and more training and streamlining the system. It does not need to be as complicated as it is.
Thank you, Christiana. And I think you're right. I think that really cuts across what we've heard from everyone today. Martha, what's your recommendation? What needs to change to make budget authority work better for you?
The way I look at it is I have a certain budget. I would like to be able to determine how that gets spent fully, not with words like cost effective, and then I have to go back and do more research and explain again why the item I picked out was the right match for me. There's just so much time that is spent. I'd like a level of trust there that this budget is already smaller than what other people get on the traditional caddy, and have some trust that I know what I need and have picked the best goods and services for myself and allow me to spend that money that way without so much jumping through the hoops over and over and over again.
Thank you, Martha. I know that resonates with a lot of people. You got an amen in the chat. Maria, your turn. What do you recommend?
I think for me, it would just be the transparency of seeing my entire budget, and being able to know that, I can pull from different parts and move it to exactly where I need it and not have it categorized as this is your limit here, this is your limit here, but nothing can cross from one to the next. That would help a lot.
Thank you, Maria. And then Charlie, what would be your recommendation?
Well, my first recommendation would be to have budget authority. I guess is so that's number one. I would just say that um, I cannot believe in my wildest imagination that each person that has budget authority doesn't know what their budget is. That to me is like unbelievable. I can't imagine why the state or whoever would reveal what your budget is. That's nuts. I mean, how are you supposed to live your life and plan for things if you don't know what your budget is? That who lives a life like that outside the PCA where you don't know what you've got to spend and so on? So that's nuts. And the other thing is, I would just say that if we do get budget authority, a part of our demands is that the FMS partners you're in the state. I don't know if there'll ever be any respect. To be quite honest with you, it's more of a we're seen more of a, as a drag on the budget as opposed to the uh, quality of life and the ability to live outside of an institution. I don't know if there'll ever be trust, but certainly respect to me is a big part of the equation. So those are just some of the thoughts that come to my mind.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm not seeing other questions come in the chat, but with our 7 minutes remaining, to our huddlers, do you all have questions for each other that anything someone said that you want to ask a follow-up question? And then meanwhile, people should feel free to add any final questions in the chat and I'll help bubble those up. Martha, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just a thank you, Maria, for explaining so clearly about how your system works. I'm appalled at the idea of cash cards and having to, go back and forth. What our system in is Minnesota is the big process is getting it approved in the budget. That's where I do the research and the back and forth. But once it's approved, I can go anywhere and purchase it with my credit card and then submit to my FMS the receipt for it. And then she puts that money back in my account that same week. So something different is possible.
Well, thank you for sharing that because we have asked for something similar to where, can we just go out and buy it, pay for it? And mostly because, it's like when we did this last year, several of us, we waited like, 6 weeks to be able to purchase something. And it was something, it was work we had done. So by the time we purchased it, you're already getting notices that you're going to be turned over, to a credit bureau or whatever because you haven't paid your bill. And the other part to that, and I shared this with the state, is that I actually called the company and they were very, very gracious and they understood, but it was like I had to explain to them about my disability, about my program, about everything I need. I'm like, do you know how humiliating that is? All I'm doing is having work done, and I have to tell them all of my personal things to justify why I haven't paid this. And, nobody else has to do that in their life, but it seems like that's acceptable for us because we're using funds that the state graciously says they will grant to us. I don't know. It's just very humiliating.
I agree so much, and I think that a, a flexibility in how things are paid, having multiple ways to pay for them, having the ability to have reimbursement, the ability to have a Visa payment, direct payments, I think that's key to this. And as you said, Maria, it's to go in and have to disclose every time anybody you want to pay. It doesn't seem right, right? To justify how this is going to be paid. So I think creating that flexibility in with the financial management services of how services are paid, how they're typically paid, you know.
It
Absolutely.
seems to me that that either you're allowed to use these not atypical personal care things like self-determinants of health, but you're approved or you're not approved. You shouldn't have to go groveling with the state or the FMS about, well, I need to, I need this. And sometimes people don't have credit cards that they go out and buy something, they get reimbursed. So it's either yes, you are, or no, you're not. And there are parameters set up about what you can do and what you can't do and what you can buy, and what you can't buy. And so to me, it seems like I noticed in the chat, somebody seemed to say, said it was dehumanizing. Yeah, yeah, yes, it's dehumanizing. I mean, I want to live my life, with the least amount of intrusion from the state or from the FMS. I want to be able to have the ability to purchase these things, and you talk about trust. Again, that's the opposite of trust. It's like it's distrustful. They don't believe that what you're doing is illegal or incorrect or whatever the terminology is. I don't believe there's ever going to be trust. It's either yes you can or no you can't.
We can still hope.
Yes, we can. Yes, that's true.
Or ask for it. Yeah.
Well, and I hope people are listening in on this huddle and thinking about everything you're raising. We're running low on time, so I'm going to say thank you so much to each one of our huddlers for a really powerful conversation, for sharing so detailed and with such specificity. And, thank you to everyone who's participated in the chat, sharing such rich discussion about these topics alongside this conversation, sharing about your upcoming self-direction conferences, answering each other's questions. Someone had asked about our next huddle. It's also been mentioned today that the Self-Direction Center has a national conference coming up in Minneapolis at the end of May. So given that we're going to have one huddle between now and then, because it's just a bit more than we can pull off to do two. So I'm sorry, we strive to do monthly, but bear with us. We're new and we're making a lot happen, but more to come very soon on the date for the next huddle. It's looking like it's going to be early May. And I think a very relevant discussion right now. We're looking at a topic around stakeholder engagement and self-direction. So hearing from people who are using the program to inform how the program's designed and where that's working well and how we can do better and strengthen that. So more to come. Thank you for your patience as we pull all this together. And just thank you everyone for a great discussion. Appreciate you all so much.
Thank you, Molly and Brenda. Thank you for doing this. I think this is just wonderful and so needed.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll look forward to more huddles to come, and we will make the recording available at some point soon after today. So thank you, everybody, and I hope we'll see you at our conference.
Good to meet everyone.
Yeah, take care.